Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Australian Renewable Fuels Week. For those of you that don't know, I'm Shahana McKenzie, CEO of Bioenergy Australia, and I'd like to start today by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which the library was built. We pay respect to Aboriginal elders past, present, future, and extend that respect to other First Nations people that may be here today. Apologies, I have to do housekeeping again for everyone that was here yesterday. So bathrooms are located outside, just past the glass house and the lockers. All of the meal breaks will be served out in the front area just outside as well. In the event of an emergency, please follow instructions from library wardens, proceed to the nearest safe exit and gather outside at the Domain Park on Hospital Road. Australian Renewable Fuels Week would not be possible without our sponsors. Our government partner, the New South Wales Government, platinum sponsors BP, LanzaJet and Australian Gas Infrastructure Group, gold sponsors Gemina, CEFC, Neste, Argus Media, Green Power, Licella and LMS Energy, and our event sponsor for last night's cocktail reception, the Queensland Government. I would also like to acknowledge Green Power for matching the electricity used at the conference with 100% Green Power renewable electricity. I would also like to once again acknowledge our speakers that have travelled internationally and domestically to attend the conference, and to thank our members who, for some of you, have been on this journey with us for a very long time, and it is fantastic to see the momentum that is building here. To lower our impact, we have not had printed programs this year. You will notice on the back of your lanyard, there is a QR code for the program and a second QR code for our chat room for questions, Q&A, so I encourage you to use those. Now, we are absolutely delighted to have the Honourable Penny Sharpe, New South Wales Minister for Climate Change, Minister for Energy, Environment and the Minister for Heritage here to welcome us here today. I'm delighted to introduce Minister.
Thanks very much. Thanks for everyone who's attending at 8:30 in the morning after 2 days of conferencing. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay respects to their elders past and present. And thank Bioenergy Australia for bringing us all here together to discuss and share the opportunities of renewable fuels in Australia and in particular my interest in New South Wales. Bringing down emissions, supporting decarbonisation in hard-to-abate sectors, creating jobs, reducing waste, finding new export markets and future-proofing our tourism sector are all tied to the success of renewable fuels. Events like this one are important to bring together investors, researchers and policymakers to contribute to the development of a renewable fuels industry right here in New South Wales. Everyone in this room understands the need to decarbonise our economy. The New South Wales Government has made our commitment to get to net zero through the legislation of emission reduction targets and the creation of the Net Zero Commission. We want to set policy certainty and shared targets so government and industry can work in lockstep. We want to establish the government architecture, the policy and the programs to ensure that targets are met, not just by this government, but by all governments to 2050 and beyond. We do this because our economic prosperity relies upon it. We also do this because we have a responsibility to our children and their children that we are doing what we can in the time that we have to leave our planet in better shape than we found it. This is not easy. Recent reports have warned that reaching our targets remains a challenge. And let's just say that the global climate has changed pretty quickly in the last few months. But this is a challenge that the New South Wales Government will not turn away from, just because it is hard. We understand the need to focus our attention and pull all levers across sectors. Levers like decarbonising our grid so households and light transport can electrify. Whether it is the large infrastructure projects that are well underway or the uptake of household solar and batteries, all are contributing to meeting our targets. We also know that the pathway and technologies to decarbonise vary in different sectors, and some are just not yet available. Hard-to-abate sectors like manufacturing, maritime, aviation, agriculture, mining and heavy transport account for a significant amount of the country's emissions. and their share is likely to grow as emissions come down in other sectors more rapidly. And many in these sectors can't electrify yet, meaning the opportunities available to them to decarbonise has been limited. Let's use hydrogen as an example. Hydrogen has been the singular solution considered for many sectors, yet for a range of reasons, production hasn't progressed as quickly as we had hoped. And this is not despite the best efforts of many. Government support has funded hydrogen hubs, provided R&D grants and offered electricity concessions worth $3 billion. There are businesses progressing and scaling up of green hydrogen, and there's some fantastic work out there that I'm very pleased to get to go and see. But we're not there yet. The commitment to assist to bring on hydrogen as soon as possible remains, but while this industry continues to develop, our government is looking at all options, particularly those that will be ready sooner. This is why I am so optimistic about renewable fuels and their place in the New South Wales economy. Renewable fuels like biomethane, biogas, sustainable aviation fuel, methanol and biodiesel, if I've missed any one of yours, I apologise, but I think I've got most of them there, represent exciting opportunities to help our hard-to-abate sectors decarbonise. In some cases, this might be a short-term bridge, but for others, it may be a longer-term replacement for fossil fuels. Renewable fuels can also underpin and will underpin the future of industrial activity in New South Wales. The New South Wales Government is not interested in meeting our targets through shutting down the economic powerhouses of this state. We want to work with industry to not just survive, but thrive in a net zero future. A strong renewable fuel industry in New South Wales offers new economic and job opportunities, improve fuel security, and will accelerate decarbonisation. This is a win-win-win opportunity. I think there's about 5 other wins I could put in there, but I won't. It's a win for the planet, it's a win for jobs, and it's a win for fuel security. And that's what the New South Wales Government is committed to. Standing up new industries is challenging, and we want to work together to see it happen. As most of you in this room already know, many renewable fuels, while promising, are not yet cost competitive or easily produced at scale. That's why we are finalising the renewable fuels strategy to drive the uptake of renewable fuels through targeted policy and investment. As many of you will know, my department consulted last year on a range of actions that we should consider in the strategy. We wanted to test ways to drive demand and accelerate supply, ensure our infrastructure is fit for purpose, and communicate how the industry can add value to the communities across this state. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the consultation process, and I'll take this opportunity to thank my team at DQ for the work that they're doing all the time. The input that you gave to this process was invaluable. A key proposal was an expansion of the renewable fuel scheme to include additional fuels. That means that we can look at ways to not just help hydrogen, but other renewable fuels like biomethane, renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. The timeline for the final position of the strategy is towards the middle of this year. So no, I'm not announcing it today, but we're close. We're determined to see that the strategy boosts investment and seeds the development of a thriving and sustainable renewable fuel industry in New South Wales. And it's not also going to be the strategy alone. We're working across government to progress the renewable fuels industry. We want to adapt the Green Power Accreditation Program. I see the Green Power people are here. It's a national program that New South Wales is proud to administer. Green Power is Australia's largest and most credible renewable electricity and renewable fuel accreditation program. The program currently allows households, businesses, industries and events to match their energy use with renewable energy, which is, I think, what actually happened here for this one. Green Power recently launched Australia's first and only renewable gas certification and are considering an expansion to other renewable fuel types. This can help expand the range of alternatives available to support the transition away from fossil fuels, with a particular focus on commercial and industrial customers. Through our decarb hubs, we trialled the renewable diesel in ocean and river trawlers on the northern rivers in the Hawkesbury River, and I know DPI staff are here and we're very involved with that. Let's hope that with the cyclone coming through and the flooding that's due in that part of the world, particularly in the northern rivers, that those boats are okay and that those people are safe. Last year we launched the Sustainable Aviation Fuels Prospectus to help drive investment into domestic production of sustainable aviation fuel. Our government understands the scale of the challenge that we face, but I am very optimistic about what can be achieved. By working together with industry, we want to deliver a clear policy direction that we need to drive investment and unleash innovation. I want New South Wales not to just be a participant, but to be a leader in the development of a renewable fuel industry. That's how we propel our economy and how we progress to net zero. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to make us leaders in these endeavours. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. Well, I can safely say in the 7 years that I've been in this role, I have never felt more inspired than by what you have just said. And there is such a sense of hope right now with this industry in terms of where we're heading and hopefully how we'll be able to support your ambitions in New South Wales for decarbonisation and economic development. Before I introduce Pauline, who is going to be our sponsor for this upcoming session, two things that I would like to be able to talk about. The first is this next session, which is our feedstock bumper session. For speakers in this session, we need you to keep to time. There are so many people in this session. I will come up and I will grab you if you're over time. Like I will. So that's the first one. The second is I'm delighted to announce that Bioenergy Australia will be convening a national feedstock roundtable in July of this year, bringing together all of the heads of the industry bodies of those sectors that are potential feedstock providers into this space to work together, collaborate, and really pave a path forward for this industry, supported by our feedstock partners. So very much looking forward to those of you who participate in the feedstock side of things. And yes, now over to one of our incredible sponsors, so BP. They have been with us for the last few years supporting the work that we've been doing. We absolutely appreciate it. Pauline Kennedy, the Low Carbon Policy and Advocacy Manager, ANZ for BP, our platinum sponsor. Delighted to welcome you, and thanks again, Minister.
Hi everyone, I'm kind of glad that this is a shorter stand because often I can't be seen. But so here we are. So thanks Shahana and thanks to the Bioenergy team really for the conference. It's my third year and so I see some familiar faces but also sort of really appreciate the opportunity to connect with others in the industry, which I think, given where we are at, it's really important for us to sort of know what else is happening and connect in person. So thanks for the conference. I too would like to pay my respect to the traditional custodians of the land and also to their elders past and present. And thank you, Minister. Thanks for your time. Obviously, as Shahana said, you know, it's just really great to see just how far New South Wales government is leaning in. And yesterday we did hear from some of the other governments as well, and I think that's really important. Even though we are, you know, often people are talking about a national approach, it's really important to have you and your state counterparts supporting us. So thank you. So yesterday, wow, some of you were here. It was a long day. There was a lot to take in. So we heard, you know, a lot of updates about, you know, different projects, technologies, lots of different views about where we're at as an industry. So hopefully today we can have similar kind of engagement and keep that energy going, even for the long panels. I think this next one's going to be super interesting as well. But before we get into that, I've had a few questions and I want to sort of update everybody on where BP's plans are at. So you might have seen in the media last week, globally, BP reset its strategy. You know, what does that mean? So in 2020 was the last time we had a big strategy refresh, and it's fair to say it was quite bold for a sort of a major energy company like BP, and they accelerated into the energy transition. And I think since then, the pace and the progress, I guess, of the global energy transition hasn't quite kept pace with what we were anticipating 5 years ago. And I think that's because, you know, the world's energy system's really been responding to a lot of global events, and that's been the priority. But nevertheless, in our strategy, our reset strategy, we do recognise that the world is in this sort of energy addition phase. we've got growing amounts of both fossil fuels and low carbon energy to meet that growing demand globally. And I guess perhaps most relevant to us here, BP has a view that even with a bit of current regulatory uncertainty, not just here in Australia, but obviously globally, that the demand for biofuels is expected to increase between 60 and 150% in the period to 2035. Now, that's not very long away, really. So it's just the next decade. And we think that SAF could, for example, be about 7 to 10% of all aviation fuel by 2035, which is, still quite a large role to play in our view. So what we are going to do, what the new global strategy is we're going to, I guess, focus a lot more on demand, following demand. So we will now reshape the portfolio consistent with our views on how the energy system is expected to look now in the coming years. And we will be reallocating some of our capital. So that means in our transition, we call our transition businesses, but that is where biofuel sits, but also hydrogen, electric vehicles, CCS, those sorts of things. And that means that we're going to be pursuing fewer opportunities globally with a focus on capital efficiency and competitive returns in the sort of low carbon space, including biofuels. Globally, we are expecting to spend less, so have less capital available for growing those businesses, between 1.5 and 2 billion US still a year until 2027. But for people who know BP, we were previously hoping at sort of 5 billion less a year than we were previously hoping we could allocate in the growth of these sorts of businesses. But, the good news for us here who work on biofuels in Australia, within this sort of more constrained global capital frame, biofuels is still really seen as a priority, a strategic priority for BP. And then, obviously, we're still producing large amounts of these fuels through co-processing internationally. We have access to other production capability and capacity, shares interest in other parts of the world. And of course, we're still a major trader and supplier of biofuels across the world. Within that, though, there is definitely going to be a more disciplined approach from BP on allocation of capital to grow our biofuels industry. And we have got a pretty firm 15% hurdle rate for any investments in new capacity, which I think is kind of relevant for this crowd to kind of understand what an international major is thinking is the right return on capital invested in our industry. We've scaled back near-term plans for some new biofuels. I think some of you might have seen that in the press already through the year. In line with our view on demand progression in the near term and medium term, as well as some shifts in our expectation on government policy as well. So we're going to continue to assess options for investment in standalone biofuels plants, like the one we've been looking at in Australia, but we'll only proceed with those projects when the economics and the policy are supportive. So very firm hurdle rates for us to achieve now. With this new global strategy, it definitely will be guiding BP's activity here in Australia as well. And so, as you would know, we've been developing this sort of concept for an integrated energy hub in Kwinana, which is our ex-refining site there just south of Perth. And part of that was the Kwinana Renewable Fuels, project, which is intended to produce sustainable aviation fuel and HVO. So a couple of weeks ago, earlier this year, we announced that we would be kind of rephasing our work. Some of you have been to site and you know that we were quite advanced in some of our feed. but we are now adjusting the pace of our work there and continuing to sort of develop that project with a view to capital efficiency, technical efficiency, but also importantly to assure we're kind of more aligned with where the market, how the market is developing here, and also with government policies. So we've learnt a lot. It's always been a pathfinder for BP because we haven't done a standalone heifer plant before, and that's what KRF is, Kwinana Renewable Fuels Plant. And we've kind of learnt a lot over the past few years. So certainly we know from our investors and our board and shareholders that this capital and technical efficiency is absolutely key. You have to be globally competitive, and they want to be sure that you're going to be able to compete. We also know that access to sustainable feedstocks is super important as well. Luckily, Australia's kind of pretty well placed there, as we'll hear a bit more today. And then finally, we have to de-risk that demand. So I think that's, I really do think that that's going to be driven largely by policy. So back to you, Minister. So really encouraged with where the government's heading, and and the vision to have a low carbon liquid fuels industry here. We agree. We think that we can get there, but ultimately we need that suite of policy to underpin those investments in these long-lived assets. We need a policy suite that is a kind of an investable policy suite. So we'll continue to work with you all and advocate with government here in Australia to get the settings right. So that's enough from me. Now I'm going to introduce the panel. Bear with me. I think, will you put the names up so everyone can see? Thank you, Minister. So, okay, so we've got Professor Mark Brown, Geoffrey Bell, Dr. Allan Green, Rachel, and Marc Diaz, Tom Woodlock, Paul Beetzel, James Hygate, still going, Michael Pope, and Dr. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Will you tell me? Mohammed. Okay, great, no worries. Great, thank you. Okay, so I think I'll finish there and we'll call up the first speaker.
Good morning. I'm here today, those that know me, I wear quite a few hats across my career. I'm here today representing a 23-country international collaboration on bioenergy knowledge generation and sharing called IEA Bioenergy Technology Collaboration Program. For this presentation specifically, I'm representing the task on biomass supply, which represents a subset of the 23 countries that are involved in IEA Bioenergy that are focused on sustainable biomass supply. And locally, I lead a research group at the University of the Sunshine Coast doing research on sustainable supply with the Australian forest sector. So cover this from a few angles. So looking at the task in IEA Bioenergy, we divide the world into 3 work packages. One looking at how do we understand, predict, and model sustainable biomass availability to allow more accurate predictions and planning and deployment of those supply chains. And then the other 2 work packages, work package 2 looks at the techno-economic issues related to biomass supply, while work package 3 looks at the social and socio-economic implications. So yesterday, and I expect today we'll cover as well, there's a very strong need for renewable fuels around decarbonizing hard-to-abate areas like aviation, shipping, heavy transport. And a key element to that, if we look at the biofuel space, is sustainable supply. And there's a number of challenges, particularly in the Australian context and the geography that we have in this country, around the high-cost logistics, transport, and movement of that material. So within the research and the activities that we're doing in this space, we look quite specifically at the supply chains and strategies to bring innovative and technical solutions into those supply chains to address some of those challenges. And basically with that graphic, you can see at a supply chain level, there's some relatively simple issues that we can look at around transport efficiency, material handling, and storage. And that expands out if we start to look at biohubs, where we have opportunities to do pre-processing, material consolidation that then brings resilience and confidence into the supply chain. Number of areas to look at and still opportunities for growth. And we talked about yesterday that the need to scale in this sector and that there will be limitations in scaling that around existing supply. But what I can tell you is that there's still opportunity on the table that still needs to be understood and exploited or used effectively in that initial growth phase. So if we look at forestry and specifically the harvesting operations, particularly in the plantation estate, there's still an available amount of biomass. Some of the challenges that reside within that is getting that supply chain to recognize that as a product with value and how that's treated and handled, and I'll touch on that in a later slide. There's also residues coming out of the initial processing phases, so sawmills and panel production, into the secondary production phases around timber construction. Those tend to be higher value and more competition in the market for those materials into other high-value uses. So understanding how and where they fit into potential energy opportunities is quite important if we're going to accurately understand the supply that's available. And then similar to forestry, there's agricultural residues coming from things like sugarcane gas, wheat stover, and so on. Now, what we see globally is some fairly clever strategies to try and overcome the economic or techno-economic issues that relate it to getting that material to an energy solution cost effectively. And this is one out of the US where relatively small local business is capturing underutilized biomass and using a business model whereby they basically sort and process that material through a biohub, identifying small volumes of relatively high-value product like dried firewood and some products they develop called wood straw for gardening, and being able to put some of those into high-value markets that help offset the cost of the supply and handling of that material, with a significant volume falling out of that into more industrial-style bioenergy, biofuel production facilities. The other thing that we're looking at, and again globally, and this is some research actually done in Western Australia, is working with the existing resource industries like forestry to understand the material that they're currently leaving as a residue is a product, and adapting their operations to treat that material as a product. And if you look at the image on the very bottom of the screen there, you can see little green piles between piles of logs. That's represented in the diagram just above that. Basically, traditionally, that material would have been laid out in front of the machine as a method of basically having it broken down and incorporated into the soil because there had nothing to do with it. And once you've done that, it's nearly impossible to recover that. Treating it as a product, piling it with the other products that you're producing, what we've shown is that you can increase the biomass recovery by about 28%. And reduce the cost of that recovery by 12%. So there are some relatively simple and clever strategies that can drive sustainable supply economically. Looking more at scale, and again, this is drawing on some interesting initiatives globally. That top image is some work out of Scandinavia where they look at biohubs at scale, and that's integrated with their existing forest supply chains at scale. So going back over a decade, I've attended conferences like this in Europe where some of the biggest players in the pulp and paper sector were talking about their ability to transition into biofuels and biorefining on the basis that they had the strength of the supply and the supply chain. So they were making those, at the time, billion-dollar investment decisions on the basis they had confidence that they could develop and grow those supply chains. So using these strategies is a lot about understanding how to add value to the biomass. And again, in IA Bioenergy, we've done some work about understanding what does quality look like to different technical pathways to bioenergy and biofuels. So things like being able to manage moisture content in addition to quality of the material can also have significant implications on the cost of the logistics and the supply chain. The other thing that we're seeing through this, particularly Sweden, Finland, and Canada, is that you create local businesses with local context and local contact in the community, which helps buy you social credit and community investment in what you're trying to do. So that gives you greater understanding, gives you greater support across all levels of policy when you have the local community engaged and benefiting from the efforts that you're putting in place, and things like local biohubs that create business, both employment within the biohub, but also connecting points for access to market for smaller farm, forest, and business owners in the community. We've talked multiple times yesterday, and again, I'm sure this topic will come up today, the important role of policy and in developing and promoting the deployment. This drills down in our world around biomass supply. This drills all the way down to issues related to transport logistics. Inevitably, many of the biomass products that we're looking at are low-density materials that in the restrictions around transport legislation means that we can't efficiently move that material any significant distance, so opportunities to increase the payload with high productivity vehicles and unique designs of equipment to do that is quite attractive. There's also challenges around the standardization and understanding not only of national policy but global. So I've had a couple conversations with Australian initiatives around setting up biofuel solutions, and they're challenged by understanding how they fit things like European policy settings around how you define residue waste and what that means to your carbon value of your business. So getting clarity and understanding of how those plug into your business become quite important, and facilitating that is valuable in how we deploy opportunities. The other thing we're seeing globally is the importance of partnering and engaging with existing resource industries. So I talked about the over a decade ago in Finland and Sweden talking about knowing the supply chain. There are very strong players within forestry, agriculture, and so forth that know how to manage these supply chains. And once they create an understanding that this product has a value and an opportunity in the market, there's a lot of expertise there that we can leverage into mobilizing that material in a sustainable and economically viable way. Things like long-term offtake contracts are quite common within this sector, and there's scope to have those set up in a way that you can add value to the resource, and that may come at a slightly higher percentage or cost than alternatives today, but it also comes with a 10 or 20-year stable price point that you can build your business around. So those are valuable both on the supply chain where they can build and manage their business with some confidence of access to market, but also on the supply side you have confidence of what the price point's going to be and progress your business on that basis. So basically, just summing up, efficient biomass logistics is critical, so the techno-economic solutions and working with the sectors that have some of those skills is going to be important, in line with legislative and policy settings that are supportive of the development of that side of it. Integrating with existing resources is going to be critical. Again, coming in as a secondary operation to forestry, agriculture, or other land use managers often comes at a much higher cost and other environmental implications that challenge the effective supply. The use of biohubs and pre-processing to better tailor. So we did some work in the task looking at how we convert raw biomass into a commodity. So be able to store, manage, and manage that supply chain more effectively by pre-processing that material to a higher purpose or a higher quality. And then working with the policy and legislative with industry to align markets to market growth. So without the threat of the bell, I'll pass to the next presenter.
Morning, everybody. So I'm Geoff Bell, CEO of MicroBioGen. Let me just press this. And enhancing SAF production in Australia is basically what I want to talk about, but I'm going to be focusing in on the ethanol side of things and our particular expertise in that area. So I'm going to start off giving a bit of background, which you will have all seen before, and then I'll go into something that may be a little bit new for you. So when we look at alcohol to jet, we're a microorganism company specialising around ethanol. We very much see alcohol to jet as a leading opportunity for this particular space. We think it's an all above the type approach. That is, everything would be great if everything can work. But we do see alcohol to jet particularly attractive because we don't see it as having feedstock constraints. So 70% of all that biomass in the world, it's sugars. And microorganisms can convert those sugars to ethanol. So we don't see it as feed cost constrained. And we also see it based on others' expertise suggesting that it's one of the lower cost options as well. So, but there are challenges. And I just stole this from a recent North American presentation where two issues they've identified are around carbon intensity and food competition on the ethanol front. And that's something that just happens is what our company can address. If we take a look at, again, another North American conference, similar sort of chart to where others have been showing, basically growth in all these SAF production. In this particular case, they seem to be pushing the alcohol to jet particular cart there, whereas others might think others, but you can see that in this particular case, alcohol to jet looks like it might be a pretty attractive opportunity going forward. What's interesting from our point of view is that it's proven technology. You know, first generation sugar, it's produced or ethanol's produced all around the world already today. Second generation is actually getting rolled out in Brazil. I was there just a year ago visiting plants. These are full-scale operations where you are taking sugarcane bagasse, pre-treating, hydrolyzing, fermenting, and you're getting sugarcane or sugarcane bagasse to ethanol at a higher cost than first-generation sugars, but they are doing it successfully and sending it off to Europe. So we see that real opportunity to deploy with the alcohol to jet. What do we do as a company? We're a microorganism development company. We're very narrowly focused. We specialise in just one type of microorganism. We've been doing this a long time. We've been doing it for 25 years. And basically we take the world's workhorse organism and we make it do things better. In our biofuel space, we do work in a number of areas, whether it's in protein or human foods. In the area of biofuels, we partner with Novonesis. I don't know if many people know that. They're a very large industrial biotech company, sort of 10,000 employees all around the world. And they're our partner, and they do all our commercialisation and deployment. We've successfully commercialised over 10 products with them over the last decade. Most of North America, European, etc. biofuels are produced using microorganisms developed right here in Australia. We've had long-term programs around both first-generation and second-generation biofuels, and we've received quite a bit of funding and help from the Australian government with over $8 million on specifically solving second-generation conversion issues, which has really made very good progress, and we expect that to be deployed in the relatively near future. So we have a number of projects to optimise and focusing on that sugarcane to ethanol, and we see a number of things that our targets are to lower those production costs, and a lot of these we've actually developed and are ready for deployment. We can already convert and get better sugar conversions. We'll leave less residual sugars behind, faster fermentations, etc. What's different about what we do is we have developed one microorganism does it all. It will convert those sugars to ethanol, but it will also clean up its own waste streams, which means for those even first-generation plants, you can convert those to something that no longer competes with food. So while the Europeans have an issue around first generation saying this is not sustainable, actually it will be in the future when you move to this sort of technology where you take advantage of the entire amount of carbon in the process rather than just the sugars. So what we do is we convert byproduct or waste streams into valuable high protein feed. And as a consequence of doing all these things, having more efficient and robust yeast, you end up with a lower carbon intensity as well because your process is more efficient, it's more reliable, you're not having the hiccups that you would otherwise have. Just a very, very simple cartoon. The actual technology to deploy what we've done is very, very simple. It's just taking the waste streams from your distillation columns and putting those into what's called an aerobic propagator and producing high-value single-cell protein. What's taken us 25 years to do is to put all of that in one organism. That is, one organism will do a superior fermentation than what's available today, and it will grow on its own waste stream. So you end up with the two products and a more efficient process. For second generation, the same thing is possible. Obviously a little more complex, you've got more pre-treatment, you've got more sugars, you've got different sorts of side streams, waste streams. But again, very advanced now technology in bringing this forward towards commercialisation. And you'll see that, again, the process changes are relatively simple. The real complexity is getting the organism to actually do it. In our last government grant from the Australian government, part of that was a life cycle analysis of what would be the implications of developing a new organism and actually running a process where you produced fuel and food. And you can see the numbers up there. 29% lower emissions. Now this is compared to a standard second generation plant that is already built today in, for example, Brazil. The really interesting ones are because we clean the waste streams, we have less water consumption. And because we're producing, and the analysis was basically this, it said, if you took a hectare of land that was being used for farming, whether it's grazing or some sort of wheat crop, and converted it to sugarcane, what would be the impact on the food supply to the world? What the LCA analysis said is that you would actually get 2.4 times as much food off that biofuel crop than you would if you were growing a food crop. So in other words, even a first generation plant could actually make more food from a hectare of land if it converted to a biofuel crop from food crop. And this isn't just producing cheap sugars, this is really high quality, 50% protein, single cell protein. So really important, that was done independently, but it was based on our lab results with the yields, productivities, etc. So we would love to work in Australia. Everything we do as a company is offshore. All our first generation, second generation biofuels, food, feed, everything is partnered with big global corporations outside of Australia. We have nothing deployed here. We would love to do something in Australia. We understand that Australia is still developing at the moment. We will be progressing our food and fuel concept externally to other parts of the world, but we would love to find partners here that we could work with to help, rather than develop and deploy offshore and then wait 5 years for it to come back to Australia. We'd love to sort of do it in series, in parallel rather than just in series. So we can see, I'll leave you to read, you can see all the advantages there. Clearly it's a lower cost, higher sustainability solution. Thanks for your time.
I think I might have picked up some time. No, it's back to zero. Damn. Thank you and good morning, everybody. You hear a lot about advanced fuels, and we have in previous meetings and in this meeting, but I want to talk about advanced feedstocks, next generation feedstocks. By way of background and establishing credentials here, I'm an agricultural science graduate from Sydney University. Not wanting to draw attention to my age, I graduated in 1975. So this is my 50th anniversary. Yay. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But I went immediately to CSIRO in Canberra, being fortunate enough to get a job in our leading research agency. And I've worked for most of that period in developing new plant oil technology and new oil crops. And I've been, since I retired from there, I've been a consultant, set up AGRENEW to work with companies in technology transfer, commercialisation, scientific advice. But, I saw a lot of change in that 50 years in an organisation like CSIRO, a lot of innovation in technologies, but some things stay the same. I'm reminded that in 1975, the catch cry from General Motors was, hydrogen is the fuel of the future. And I'm reminded today that it still is. And my chemical engineer buddies will say, it always will be. So I think we don't have to wait for hydrogen to arrive in Australia. Maybe in other parts of the world they do, but we're blessed with a very good situation with our agricultural feedstocks. We don't need to wait for the dream of affordable e-fuels to arrive. We can do a lot with what we have already. No country is better placed to decarbonise its electricity system than Australia through its renewable energy resources. And as we saw from James Williamson's slide yesterday, no country is better placed for both plant and animal feedstocks for the heifer processing into renewable fuel and SAF. So enough with all the reports and the roadmaps. We don't need any more thinking in this space. We don't need any more reflection in this space. We've been doing that for the last 3 years. We've been spinning wheels. This is a time for action. And we hope that that will happen post-election. Before talking about how we can innovate in our feedstock supply chain, why is an important point. And this landed in my in-tray last week when I was preparing the talk, actually, and it's a very nice summary of my thinking anyway. Particularly, I draw attention to the second point. It will be complex for companies to develop and scale up affordable options such as novel oilseeds, which I will talk about, but these sources will be key to overcoming supply constraints. This is, you've seen many of these charts, process charts, feedstocks through to fuel. So this is one which I've drawn up recently as part of advice to an agricultural client who was interested in what farmers could do with their feedstocks, how they could feed them into various pathways. And you can see the predominant feedstocks on the left, the grain-based and the biomass-based ones. In the grain space, it's oilseeds and cereals predominantly, sugarcane there as well as a source of sugar. And they can all go through to the predominant fuel pathways. I'm going to be focusing completely on the oilseeds area, so the oils going through the heifer process. I might ask the question, how many feedstock producers, growers are in the audience? Hands, show of hands? One. Fantastic. That's one more than I was expecting, actually. There's a big gap, isn't there? We're not... Three? Do I hear four? I was very pleased to hear Shahana's announcement of the commitment to a national feedstock roundtable. We need this urgently to engage with the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector has all these feedstocks and it's interested to know what it can do with them, but it's also interested to know how you'll pay for them. They already have markets for these feedstocks. They already have value on farm for these feedstocks. This industry needs to get close to the growers, not just the representatives of the growers, or the companies in the middle, but the growers themselves if you want to really generate this business. So that's a bit of a political statement. It might mean I don't get to my last slide, but I felt I had to make it. Just going to segue through to the last slide from my talk last year, because I think it still holds. This is a little bit more refined version of that slide. But basically, this is an action plan of how we can build up the feedstock supply for heifer-based processes, and heifer is going to be the initial process in Australia as it is rolling out globally. It's the one that's there now, producing commercially. And across those timeframes, here's how we can build the supply. So this is in million tonnes, and on the vertical scale, it's basically the size of the Australian aviation fuel sector requirements. We can turn around about 3 million tonnes of oil by retaining the exported canola and cottonseed and tallow that we do now. And it's been pleasing to see that this is the feedstock plan for some of the initial projects which have been under discussion. But we can do more than that. In the next 5 years, we can actually expand that canola production. In Australia, we have 17 million hectares of land which we devote to crops that we export, products that we export, and only 2 million of those are devoted to oilseed crops. We do about 3.5 million in total for domestic supply. Only 2 of those 17. So we've got 15 million hectares of land to produce crops that we export, or to produce crops and products that we can use internally if we choose to do that. So I think there's ample opportunity to do this. You will see flatline projections for heifer feedstock wherever you go in the reports, and it's still happening. No one's been looking at what we could do if we wanted to build this industry, only what we can do with our current situation. So that's the first step we could take. The second step is we can start to intensify oil production in those crops, increase the oil content on the same agricultural footprint, no additional land. And we can do that because of some technology developments. And the third one is we can actually develop some really interesting new oil crops. And we can build that way up to an initial 50% of volume requirements to a 50% SAF fuel over that period of time. We have to start doing that now, though. We have the capability to do it, but these products have 10, 15-year development and deployment timeframes. If you want to have that supply in 2040s, you have to start doing the work now and investing now. So let's stop investing only in the future fuels and start investing in the ones we can actually create with known technology on our known resources. I'd like to see just a fraction of the money that's gone into hydrogen economy go into agriculture, because this could be done in the order of $100 million, not $5 billion. So we should be diversifying our investment, I think. And the reason that this is so promising is because of breakthrough technology. We not only have plenty of land, great oilseed growers, we also happen to have the best lipid oil scientists in the world. We are leading the world in engineering plant oils. And one of the developments I spoke about last time, and which has now been announced in September, the commercial arrangements, CSIRO worked out in the group that I led before I retired how to take 4 genes out of a seed that produces oil and put them into the leaf of that plant and produce oil in the leaves. And we produced up to 30% oil in tobacco leaves. And the leaf is 2/3 of the plant compared to 1/3 for the seed. So you can see an immediate potential here. That technology is what we call biomass oil. And Nuseed have been able to secure the commercial rights to that technology, and you might hear some more around that from Rachel, or in the future maybe. She's only got 10 minutes too. But you can go to the press releases of that from September where those arrangements have been announced. And a little company from England has also got involved there. You might have heard of them. I think it's called Unilever. Yeah, they've formed an arrangement there too, so they recognise the potential. This shows you at scale. You know, on the first 3 crops where we produce the oil in the seeds, and we can produce it in the leaves, we can go to that level of production, nearly the same as oil palm. That's UR for those of you who aren't growers. And that's what a canola crop looks like in the field currently. It doesn't get really working until spring when it starts to flower and set seed, and then we produce about 1.3 tonnes of oil from a hectare. If we can produce it during the growing season as well, we can double that production of oil and potentially double our productivity. And that can be done in other crops as well. But we have to work out which are the best crops to do that. And my time is really running down, so I'm going to turn over all the cards, and you can read that as I walk away from the stage. These are some of the advantages. I think it's getting to 0. It's in seconds now. All the advantages that we can do with technology. So if I didn't get to it because I sat on my soapbox or stood on my soapbox for too long, there it is again. You can contact me later.
Well, whoever prepared the agenda did a good job in having Allan speak before me, because I'll talk about the oilseed opportunity that's ahead of us right today. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm Rachel Palumbo. I'm the Global General Manager of Seeds for Nufarm, and I've spent my entire career working in agriculture and helping to connect innovation with the people who actually make it happen, our growers, as Allan said. And I've seen how resilient and forward-thinking the ag industry can be. And I know that our best solutions won't come from ivory towers or policy papers. They come from our paddocks and from the people who live and breathe and evolve agriculture every day. So today I want to talk about the opportunity that's right in front of us now. It's an opportunity to strengthen our rural communities. It could improve farm profitability, and it could help to secure Australia's fuel future. This isn't about changing how we farm, as Allan shared. It's about making the most of what we can already do. And so let's start by picturing a morning in rural Australia. It's early morning in Narrabri, northern New South Wales. The sky glows soft pink as the light stretches over the fields, and a warm breeze moves through the crops. But instead of the usual white cotton bolls that have already been harvested, something different sways in that rising sun, and that's these golden yellow flowers. This is Carinata. It's a new crop, and it can bring fresh opportunities to Australian agriculture. So let's have a little bit of a hypothetical thinking of what this could be for our growers. Sarah is a third-generation grower running the family's irrigation property with a mix of tradition but also innovation. Like her father and grandfather before her, she grows cotton, carefully managing water to keep the farm productive. But Sarah isn't just following in their footsteps, she's thinking about how she carves her own path. She's started growing a new oilseed crop as a break crop, improving her soil health and making the most of her land. For Sarah, this isn't just another crop, it's an opportunity. It strengthens her farm, diversifies her income, and contributes to something bigger. Every tonne she harvests helps produce low-carbon biofuels, fuels that power planes and heavy transport, cutting emissions and moving industries, for us in Australia, towards a cleaner future. The same land that grows fibre can also now produce fuel. Sarah is part of the future of Australian agriculture. She's not waiting for the change, she's leading it. And with the right support from the folks in this room, growers like her can help position Australia as a leader in low-carbon fuel production. Sarah's story isn't just about what's possible, it's happening right now. My team in South America are working on commercialising Carinata, and we've been able to do so. So through innovative crops like this, we're helping growers reduce emissions and build a sustainable future. And today I want to share with you a little bit about how Nufarm, with industry and government support, is making this vision a reality. One farm, one field, and one flight at a time. Australia has a real chance to boost its rural economies and secure its fuel through sustainable biofuels. If we can integrate new crops like this into our farming systems, regional communities can gain new income streams and greater long-term resilience, and growers benefit from having a profitable break crop that also improves soil health. As we've discussed this week, locally produced biofuels also reduce our reliance on imported fossil fuels, making Australia more energy secure. As global uncertainties continue to impact fuel supply, having a domestic renewable source could strengthen our position. We have the potential to grow a biofuel industry that supports our economy and at the same time reduces our environmental impact. So investing biofuels for us isn't just about energy, it's also about strengthening rural Australia and making agriculture more sustainable and securing our future. Imagine if every underutilised hectare of farmland contributed to a cleaner planet. Australian growers are already playing a significant role in reducing transport emissions, as a large amount of our canola goes to Europe for biofuel production. Carinata can build on that success. It's not just another crop, it's a catalyst for change, and it can help to position Australia as a leader in clean fuel innovation. It's a non-food oilseed crop and it fits into existing farming systems, and we're positioning it to be grown as a break crop. So it protects and improves soil health while providing that extra income. And most importantly, it's a certified low-carbon feedstock for biofuels. And here's why it works. So it removes carbon from the atmosphere, improves soil health, and requires minimal inputs, making it highly sustainable. Growers like Sarah can earn extra income through a profitable break crop, and with the right policies in place, it can be scaled to contribute meaningfully to the supply chain. So by embracing this opportunity, we can move to a more resilient and self-sufficient system, and one that can benefit our growers as well as the environment. So what have we achieved so far? We're not just talking about potential, we're already seeing results. In 2024, Nufarm ran trials in northern New South Wales and southern Queensland, and these trials showed that it integrates well into farming systems while delivering real economic and environmental benefits. Zach and Ali Carrigan, growers in northern New South Wales, trialled the crop on their property, and their experience was positive. They're looking forward to growing it again this year, collecting more data and seeing how it fits into their broader operation. Encouraged by these successes, we're continuing trials in 2025, making it easier for more growers to get involved. Meanwhile, in places like Argentina and Brazil, we're growing this crop at scale, feeding a well-established biofuel industry in Europe. With strong policy support, it's proving to be a commercially valuable crop that strengthens agriculture while reducing emissions. So no matter where it's grown, the message is clear, it works, it supports growers, it improves the land, and it provides a new renewable feedstock for a growing biofuels industry. And it's not a distant vision, as Allan said, it's something that's happening now, and we can help to lead the way. So we know that biofuels work. We know Australian growers are ready. What we need now is a coordinated effort to make it happen through policy, investment and collaboration. First, we need the right policy framework, and we've all spoken a lot about that. Growers are already contributing today, as I said before, to transport decarbonisation in Europe by exporting our Australian-grown canola for biofuels. It's time to create similar incentives right here so that Australian-grown biofuels can support our own industries and fuel security. Next, industry partnerships are really crucial. We all need to work together in order to build a supply chain that makes biofuels a mainstream solution. And scaling up production is really key. As Allan also mentioned, growers need clear economic incentives, strong offtake agreements and domestic processing capacity to ensure that growing these crops is both good for their business and for the planet. And education and support will also be vital, because growers will need the right information and tools to successfully integrate these crops into their operations, and this is where ag industry leaders like Nufarm come in and have a role to play. So let's make this happen. We have a solution that can grow in our fields right now. This is a proven, sustainable and scalable option for securing our fuel future, but we need action, and we all have a role to play. So with the right support, we can turn this opportunity into a reality, and one that benefits our economy, our environment, our farmers and our future generations. So now picture an Australia where our fuel is homegrown, our growers thrive, and our economy leads the way in renewable energy. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to share my thanks with Bioenergy Australia for inviting me to present today and for hosting us here for Australia Renewable Fuels Week. Really pleased today to be able to share a perspective on a crop we've heard a bit about already during the conference, Pongamia. And the object lesson here is all that it takes to bring a novel crop into our advanced biofuel system. So I'll tell you the story of the past 25 years of work, what it took to bring Pongamia to where it is today, not only because we think it's a feedstock that's poised to make great contributions to agriculture and energy, but also because we think it may hold lessons for other emerging feedstocks that we want to bring into our food and energy system. I'll talk about 3 points today. How do you turn a wild tree into an agricultural crop? Once you have that agricultural crop, how do you elevate it into a valuable orchard? And then ultimately, how do we maximize the farming value we create for producers and in our value chain? So what is Pongamia? Pongamia is a native Australian contribution to the world, an oilseed tree that functions in its natural environment on what we'd call marginal land, areas where other agricultural crops historically haven't gone. It's got a great series of qualities in monsoonal climates adapted to both the intense drought periods and high heat, but also those periods like we're seeing this week of intensive rain. The capacity to manage those extremes has made it the super tree for a climate-changing world, one in which the world is beginning to resemble monsoonal periods more and more. We also know that the tree isn't familiar to most of us because it's got some defensive compounds in the beans that make it bitter. That's why we're not Pongamia eaters and why we consume other oil seeds like soy. These defensive compounds are exactly what ag producers want because you don't have to spend money on pesticides and worry about predation. And it creates something that for us was the foundation of converting this wild tree into a consistent crop. So let's take on the first part, which is what did we learn from taking this Australian contribution and working with it all over the world? The first thing we did was to bring this crop to bear in a variety of places to see if we could have sustained increased yield beyond a wild population tree. And we were really successful in doing that by focusing in on the individuals themselves. After observing for a number of years thousands of individual trees, we identified 30 that were consistently high performing, and we brought those around the world, replanting them in places like Hawaii, which you see on the right. That Hawaiian Pongamia orchard exhibits one of the characteristics of individual trees. Look at the rows. They're all the same. That's the same individual. And yet, row to row, they're different. The bright green tree there on the left side is early in the flushing stage, while some of the darker trees have leafed out for a few weeks more. Some are pretty compact in their form and others really expansive in the row. And that's the beginning of agriculture, moving from a wild tree to a manageable crop, identifying that demands that you understand the genetics. And so to do that, we built a genomics platform, a platform with molecular markers where we could not only identify the individual, but understand as we learned more about each individual, why they were the way they were. On the basis of that, we've selected 10 of these individuals where we have breeder rights here in Australia and around the world. And we've turned those individuals into production trees. Now, what are you looking at there? You have a rooted cutting, a little piece of branch material that's been taken, and a few weeks later forms that beautiful set of radial roots. Well, that took 10 years to figure out how to do, because it's not a natural thing for a little branch to become an intact tree. But it was through extensive work in nurseries around the world with global partners to figure out exactly those conditions to rapidly produce strong, high-quality trees that could be put out as the foundation for great orchards. This vigorous tree foundation gets then built upon with strong field care practices. Pongamia wants to grow in the way you see at the top. That's a beautiful Pongamia tree in a park setting, sinuous and seeking the light and making use of its natural form. What we need to do if we're going to make an oilseed crop for producers is to grow it like we do in the bottom, with an intact stem, a single stem that can be mechanically harvested, shaken, and where you see a crown that's capable of supporting over 100 kilograms of crop weight in each and every single tree. This, again, took a decade of work to identify how you train that tree in a way that producers can manage it economically, and we can predictably get a crop off that tree. So all of that science that went into the early stages of finding those trees and moving them from a wild condition to an effective orchard crop then needed to be integrated in a system setting. And so the second lesson of our work, what we spent the next decade of the company working on, was building a great orchard system. The science of maximizing yield is figuring out how you get different trees in the same field that are flowering at different times to set a crop that you can take off the field in a consistent, manageable way each year. And so we began by looking at when each of our individuals flowered, to study not only what was that flowering time period, each of those little flowers on each raceme or stalk is open for only one day, and how that flowering period changes in different parts of the world, from central Queensland to northern Queensland, or from Hawaii to Florida. These types of observations, what you see there, both of a pollinator, an insect pollinator, and of our flowers, gave us the ability to identify the characteristics of individuals and to begin to organize male and female performance of each tree. With that understanding, we were then able to study the system at an orchard level. There's a trial planting block where you see an individual in the top of the screen, a seedling tree we deliberately put, who has unique genetics to every other tree in the field. We studied its pollen because through our genomics platform, we could tell a bean harvested at the bottom of that same orchard had the parental contribution from that tree in the top. What we learned from that is that the pollen cloud could expand over 100 meters within an orchard. And that gave us the ability to design an orchard that could be optimized to get those consistent rows for management, but those male-female tree interactions that you need to set an abundant crop. Moreover, we identified the beginning, middle, and end of the harvest period so we could have maximum receptivity, bees moving through the field in a consistent way, complementing introduced pollinators with native pollinators. And ultimately, design in a field expresses what we know about per hectare yield. We trialed how closely or how far apart to put those trees. You see wider densities there and narrower densities to concentrate the yield per hectare. More trees does not necessarily lead to more yield because we're trying to balance light, growth, and the cost of caring for each and every one of those trees. So you plant the trees and you harvest your saf, right? Not exactly. As most ag producers know, even the most lucrative energy crop is not enough to support the agriculture economics that producers need to be able to run their business well. And so Terviva's work was to look at that oilseed and its constituent parts and identify the products in the marketplace that we could create or deliver that would be valuable to farm producers and make a contribution to the broader environment. We have a series of oil products, such as our biofuel feedstock, then a series of meal products, such as animal feed and human flour, and finally a set of valuable co-products. To folks in this room, we focus on low carbon intensity feedstock that's valuable to our supporters like Mitsubishi Corporation, Idemitsu, and Chevron, who are looking at building green oil wells, permanent long-term supplies of these low carbon intensity feedstocks for products like SAF and renewable diesel. But they're also looking for certifications, those policy assurances that the crop the farmer is going to grow will get that high sustained value in the marketplace. We identified with ISCC that ISCC EU and Plus were certifications of value for some of our customers, and we're currently working with the government of Japan to get ISCC Corsia for Pongamia. These are important contributions because they speak to the aspiration of energy producers to have a predictable source of supply over the next generation as they make these billion-dollar investments in HEFA plants in Australia and beyond. We then have to take the majority of that bean, which is a meal cake after you've extracted the oil, and find valuable sources of market value. Terviva characterized what made that Pongamia bean bitter, identified markets that could be served efficiently, economically, and could provide nutritional contributions both through animal feed and human-grade flour, a high-protein flour with great functional properties. Finally, the bioactives, those very bitter compounds themselves that we are able to remove now commercially from the plant are valuable in pharmaceutical or crop protection practices. Half the biomass of the crop is energy within the seed that can be made biochar or steam for processing operations. And we have carbon credits that we're able to secure for growers and producers around the world. Ultimately, we have an opportunity to move this tree over the course of the last quarter century into a crop, one that's created orchard value at a system level, and ultimately that's connecting to market value for food, feed, and energy for producers not only here in Australia, but worldwide. Thank you very much for your time and the chance to share the journey of Pongamia with you today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Woodlock, and I'm a senior biofuels reporter for Argus Media, based here in Sydney. And I'll be presenting on how Australian tallow is supporting the global biofuels industry. So this is the structure of my presentation. I'll quickly go into what Argus does and what we do as a company. I'll then go through what is tallow, how Australian tallow is supporting the global biofuels industry, and then finish up on why Australian tallow needs to be priced. So first and foremost, Argus is a price reporting agency which has been around for over 50 years. The company's roots are in pricing crude oil, but over time its coverage of commodities has expanded into oil products, coal, metals, agriculture, fertilizers, as well as biofuels and their feedstocks. So we have around 1,300 staff around the world, and the company produces 42,000 daily and weekly price assessments. And here in Australia, the team covers a variety of products, including agriculture, carbon credits, oil products, metals, coal, and biofuels. So this is Argus's biofuels portfolio. And as a price reporting agency, every day we make price assessments based on conversations with market participants and the large data sets that are available to us. This is of interest to people in the biofuels industry because we make price assessments of biofuels like SAF, HVO, and their numerous feedstocks across the world. And all of these prices can be found in our daily reports, and you can have a look at them outside as well at our stand. And we also have a consulting division, so my colleague Jonty made a good presentation yesterday, and they kind of do medium and long-term forecasts and things like that. So, what is tallow? So the short answer is tallow is rendered animal fat. It's used in a variety of things. Back in the day, it used to be used to make candles, but it's moved away from that mostly now. It's used in soap, skincare products, and it's also used to cook your food. But primarily now, tallow is mostly used to produce biofuels like renewable diesel and SAF around the world, and that's what this presentation is going to be looking at. So, how is Australian tallow supporting the global biofuels industry? While there is not a large-scale industry here in Australia, the use of biofuels is booming around the world. And Australian tallow is not supporting any production here at the moment, but it's helping the rest of the world decarbonise. So Australian tallow exports, they hit an all-time high last year, and around 90% of those volumes, they went to Singapore and the US, where the tallow is then processed into biofuels. So up in Singapore, Neste takes this tallow, converts it into SAF, and it will then sell it to airlines who are seeking to decarbonise. And then over in the US, there's companies like Diamond Green in the US Gulf, and then Neste and then Marathon Petroleum in California. So they take this tallow and they process it into renewable fuels. This is a nice map of the US market. So the US market is very big, it's very important. And you can see where it's sourcing its various feedstocks from. So you can see, Australian tallow is competing with tallow from South America, especially Brazil, into the US Gulf. But Australian tallow doesn't just compete against tallow from other countries. It competes against other feedstocks like used cooking oil. So, as you can see here, biofuels capacity has grown at a rapid rate over the past few years, and this is expected to grow going forward. The US is clearly far ahead, but the rest of the world is starting to catch up with important additions, which could use feedstocks like Australian tallow in the next few years. So, comparing some of the feedstocks, as you saw in the last slide, biofuels capacity around the world is growing significantly, and around 70% of that growth in terms of increasing SAF output is come in the form of additional hydrotreatment capacity, which uses the HEFA process. This means there's a huge opportunity for these feedstocks in the coming years, being vegetable oils, used cooking oil, animal fats like tallow, and Australia produces quite a few of these feedstocks in the table. And Australian tallow is particularly popular because it's got very good traceability and a low carbon intensity score. And using tallow as a feedstock for SAF reduces greenhouse gas emissions by around 75% compared to the use of regular jet fuel. So why does tallow need to be priced? And a quick disclaimer, at the end of that graph says 20th of February. Prices since then have just gone up. So that is out of date now, in date for the dates on the bottom. But we started pricing Australian tallow, Argus did, late last year. We created an index which tracks how the price changes each week. And Australian tallow price has been historically very opaque. And Argus has now brought some transparency to this market. And this transparency is important for companies that use tallow or wish to use tallow as a feedstock for biofuels production. If you're going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in building a biofuels plant, you need to know how much your feedstock is going to cost. And you need to know what price finished biofuels products are trading at on a day-to-day basis. And as you can see, there is no one price for tallow. It depends on time, location, and specifications, all the way down to what the free fatty acid makeup is of a tallow or its metal contents. They all play a part in the price formation. And Argus assesses these prices across the world, in Europe, America, South America, and now Australia as well. And Argus also assesses the prices of competing feedstocks, such as used cooking oil, palm oil, rapeseed oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, to name just a few. And on top of that, we price SAF, renewable diesel, renewable identification numbers, and carbon markets too. So all of these prices are used by market participants in contracts as reference points and starting points for negotiations, and so on. So what future does biofuels have in Australia? I think across the industry, I think everyone will agree. There's probably not going to be any significant biofuels production in Australia unless there is some kind of government support in the form of a mandate. If the government could take the stick approach, like the EU does, where heavy penalties if you don't start, decarbonising, or you could use the carrot, like the US does, with tax credits. There's lots of ways that it can be done. It could be a combination of the two, but we'll have to see how that develops. And just a couple of months ago, or a month ago, BP recently paused its conversion of the former Kwinana oil refinery over in WA, and they highlighted that the necessary incentives to make the switch were just not in place. And there's domestic refiners. You've got Ampol, you've got Viva. They've expressed interest in biofuels, and they're doing the work to start doing it, but they need some certainty on the demand and the supply side mechanisms. There's Jet Zero, consortium of companies, is also aiming to build a couple of biofuels plants up in Queensland, one with the alcohol-to-jet pathway, and then the other using the heifer pathway. And it's a shame that the necessary policies are not in place, because there are large companies, Qantas, Virgin, Rio Tinto, that they want to decarbonise, and they want to meet their emission reduction goals through using biofuels. And even the Australian military has been using biofuels as well. And there's already some demand in place from those companies, and trials have been going on. But without that additional local supply, that should also kind of help foster additional demand as prices start to come down. And we heard it a lot on the first day, or yesterday even. Australia is increasingly reliant on imported oil products and foreign crude, which I should add, Argus also prices. And if you read the news, you know the global geopolitical picture is worsening, and big questions of fuel security are really starting to come into the fore. And I think that could be a deciding factor in whether the government that wins the election will create the required regulatory environment for a local biofuels industry to thrive. So, thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to my presentation on how Australian tallow is supporting the global biofuels industry. Australian tallow is just a small part of the global industry, and there are many other feedstocks that Australia produces or want to start producing in the future. Canola, Pongamia, and Argus is exploring these price assessments. We're doing it with the industry, and we're going to do it for the industry as well. That's me finished. Thank you.
Hi, good morning everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm Paul Beastall, I'm CEO at Hutan Bio, and we are a UK-based technology company that grows algae to produce a low-carbon or zero-carbon fuel. So actually we could potentially have presented in yesterday's strand, because we've already proven that our fuel works in a blend directly in engines without any downstream processing, but we're also investigating the opportunities for SAF and for higher levels of biofuel content in light diesel engines. We're headquartered in Cambridge in the UK. Our R&D labs and field test site are in Malaysia, and we are already producing oil in Malaysia for lab testing. And what I want to do is just give you a quick intro to, pressing the right button, what we're doing, what we're about. And Hutan Bio's core IP is unique biology. So rather than relying on so-called library strains of algae like people tried and failed with 10 years ago, our founders undertook a 120-person-year program to find the right organism, one that was robust, produced a short-chain hydrocarbon directly, and grew in high salinity water. We screened 1.2 trillion colonies of marine microorganisms and found a genus, a family of algae that was completely unknown to science. And that is our core IP. And very importantly, this algae is naturally occurring. There's no GMO. We are exploring GMO pathways to improve efficiency, but all the data we're getting at the moment is with an organism or a family of organisms that we've worked with just using effectively selected breeding, directed evolution, as the biologists call it, so a bit like cat and dog breeding to improve the performance. And our success emerges from really three things coming together. One is the organism itself, so it's naturally highly resilient, capable of thriving in extreme conditions. This is an organism that grows in tropical waters. It loves heat. Many algae that have been used previously are grown or found in temperate waters. They're found close to US universities or European universities where the academic research was done. Our organism is found in the Red Sea, in the Straits of Malacca, in places where it is really hot. And therefore, because of natural selection, that's where it performs really strongly. But an organism alone does not actually help us produce something at scale. And so we've put a lot of work into optimizing cultivation methods to support high-density growth, innovative vertical farming systems that represent a significant departure from conventional algae growth platforms. So instead of sprawling open ponds that go over very large areas and lose vast amounts of water to evaporation, our compact, custom-designed thin-film photobioreactors maximize land use efficiency and preserve these precious resources. And our designs are modular, allowing for demand-based expansion, minimizing initial capex requirements, and establishing a clear path to commercial scale. And the third angle we need effectively is scalable, smart cultivation solutions. So we've thought about how you optimize farming in an automated fashion. One of the beauties of working in farming effectively, but with enclosed photobioreactors, is you can control the environment. You can measure the salinity, you can measure the pH, you can measure the sunlight, and you can control the nutrients to optimize the growth. And something that's really important for us, and really important when we think about Western Australia in particular, is by having a solution that grows in salt water and grows in high temperatures and is tolerant to the extreme stresses you get in these desert environments, it means we can deploy biofarms in remote areas, so using unproductive and arid landscapes. This means we're not competing with food crops. We don't need fresh water to grow the organism. One thing I've learned from my limited time in Western Australia is how precious fresh water is. Growing in salt water is obviously a significant benefit. And by focusing on these marginal areas, our technology can transform underutilized territories, bringing sustainable agriculture, jobs, and avoiding competition with agriculture. So we're currently growing our oil in real-world conditions outside the laboratory in Malaysia. It's working well. The site we have in Malaysia, like much of Malaysia, is actually an area that was forest. The trees have been cut down, not by us, but I have a real problem with cutting down trees to claim to be decarbonising. Hence why we're targeting the desert areas. So actually what we're looking at, we're building at the moment towards building a 3 to 5 hectare site as an initial first-of-a-kind facility. And that will allow us to produce hundreds of tons of oil. At the moment, we're producing oil in litre scale. We're testing with partners. We're doing engine tests. We're doing lab tests with refining partners and oil majors. We need to move on to the next level. The other thing we need to be successful at this point is a source of industrial CO2. While we can grow on atmospheric, giving a higher level of CO2, around about 3 to 5%, optimises the growth. So actually next week, in fact, later this week, tomorrow, I'm flying to Western Australia. I'm going to be in the Pilbara area next Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday meeting stakeholders to see how we can help them decarbonise by using natural sources to utilise the carbon. It's not just Western Australia where we're looking at where we could go, where we could deploy. We've done a global GIS study looking at where these coastal desert regions occur that get sufficient sunlight. This ranges from Chile and Peru in the west through here to Australia in the east. The other market we're getting significant traction in is Morocco. In some ways very similar to Western Australia, long coastline, lots of sunlight, warm waters, and obviously the Middle East is an area that is of interest as well. But particularly for Western Australia, its proximity to these high-emitting industries and location of ports and therefore access to refineries or direct applications into shipping that matter and help us keep our supply chain short. Our ambition as we grow is to keep these supply chains as short as possible and to make the fuel where it is needed. It's counterintuitive to move many, many tons of fuel around the planet. So my mission for this week and next week is to continue to work with stakeholders in Western Australia to look to bring a first-of-a-kind facility to Western Australia. At this point, I would just like to highlight and thank the Western Australian government, who have been incredibly supportive in the process so far, as have the federal government representatives I've met here in Sydney and on the phone. I've had the pleasure of many, many early morning phone calls from the UK over the last 6 months, but the level of engagement we're getting from Australia is the strongest we're getting anywhere on the planet. And effectively, what we're looking for, if you look at the map, this highlights the locations that the GIS study shows where we're likely to be able to build. I'm going up to Karratha, looking in that area next week. And the aim is to build a plant, as I say, relatively small scale at this stage, but growing as we go through it, that will allow us to produce not just fuel, but actually the husks of the algae, the biomass of the algae. We've heard this from other people today, can be used as a high protein, high carbohydrate source for animal feed. We've also had early discussions with ARENA and CEFC. And again, one of the things that's really impressed me about Australia is the ability to engage in very early stage projects. Lots of places around the planet we talk, and when we're looking to build a production site, there's support and enthusiasm. But in Australia, we're getting a real sense that the governments, the authorities recognise the need to invest early to bring innovation to market. So that's just a quick introduction to what we're doing. I'm really hopeful that I'll be able to come back here next year and talk about the fact that we've just broken ground on our first facility in Western Australia. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody. So I'm James Hygate. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Firefly Green Fuels. And I'm going to talk to you today about SAF from sewage. A lot of people ask me, where did you come up with this with this groundbreaking idea of making SAF out of sewage? And I often sort of say, well, I was sat down one morning, but no, I won't go there. Actually, Firefly was born out of green fuels. We've worked in sustainable biofuels for over 20 years, actually since 2003. And Firefly really came out of a critical analysis of feedstocks. So when you would look at us as a business, I would say we are a SAF developer, but we're very much a feedstock-driven SAF developer. It was interesting when you started looking at all these areas that we wanted to look at, and sewage kind of ticked all the boxes, and it was the one area we felt we would focus in. And the reason being, when you look at the challenge that's there and what's happening today, sustainable aviation fuel is expensive to produce, regulations requiring greater usage of it, and there's just simply not enough of it. When you look at sewage sludge, and specifically sewage biosolids, it's a material that's currently very expensive to destroy. Regulations are tightening, it's getting banned from its current disposal routes, and there's way too much of it. So we're now breaking ground on the world's first facility to produce SAF from sewage in the UK. You can see our site there in the background. So if you look at the existing sewage treatment process, you take, obviously, it goes to the toilet, but then it goes through a wastewater treatment process, typically ending in anaerobic digestion. There's an output from that called biosolids. That then goes to farmland for incineration, which is massively fulfilling because it's 80% water, or landfill. But these areas of disposal are disappearing because of PFAS and microplastics contamination. So what we do is we actually link into this existing infrastructure. We have an upstream and a downstream process. The upstream process being hydrothermal liquefaction as the technology, where we would take this wet material and produce a biocrude and a biochar. The biocrude then goes to a centralised refinery for upgrading into liquid fuels, and our focus here is SAF. When we talk about biosolids, it's the stuff that there looks a bit like chocolate mousse. It's not too offensive, but we then go through this process, and it's been great having Lysella here as well, talking about the benefits of HTL. This is a new route to SAF. We're currently going through ASTM qualification at the moment. This is a slide that was presented by ASTM, Gerhan Adnik at GE last year, showing all the various routes that are coming through at the moment. So we're currently in Tier 1 and Tier 2. One of the big things we've looked at is the consistency of the material. Over the last few years, we've been getting samples sent in weekly from specific sewage treatment works, from sewage treatment works all over the UK and now internationally. The biocrude is also super, super consistent. When you look at the SAF that's made, we are confident to say that it's chemically indistinguishable from fossil jet. We're starting with a crude that is not too dissimilar from a fossil crude. Quite early on, we contracted Cranfield University to do an independent LCA of the process, and this is based on the energy supply in the UK in 2030, so 70% renewables, and they found that there would be an overall life cycle saving of 92%. We think that may well get higher because of the utilisation of biogenic CO2, etc., from the plant. I think what mostly gets the airlines interested, as though, is because we have this low value or negative value feedstock. Actually, you can see a world where this could reach cost parity with fossil jet. We've had significant industry commitments. So we have a binding offtake with Wizz Air for 525,000 tonnes of fuel over 15 years. This is not just a bit of paper, it's a proper take-or-pay, no-loss floor price contract. So you can do the sums. That's quite a great big first order to get. Wizz Air also invested in the company. You look at the technology partnerships we have on the downstream refining. We worked with Chevron Lummus Global. They're the industry leaders in hydrotreatment, and it's their system that we're developing around our specific crude. On the upstream HCl selection, we've worked with Atkin Realis. I'm providing a down selection on technologies and where we'll be using who where. Petrofac is our EPC, who we've used before in biofuels projects as we've developed, and Boeing. So Boeing announced last year Farnborough Air Show their investment into us, and I think their key interest is the potential for this fuel to be used as very high blends or 100% SAF. Our first site is in the UK, in Harwich, South East England. As you can see, there's quite a lot of stuff there already. It's on an existing small-scale refinery owned by Halterman Carless. We have more feedstock now committed to the project than we need to produce the fuel there. This site will be producing 100,000 tonnes of biocrude per year, about 45,000 tonnes of SAF and about 30,000 tonnes of naphtha. Here we go. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a hub. We have an upstream and a downstream process, so a hub and spoke model. The hydrothermal liquefaction plants will be co-located at wastewater treatment works, whereas the hydrotreatment plant is actually at a centralised hub. And this is how we're scaling across the UK. We've also got great traction in the US at the moment, where we partnered with Synagro, the largest processor of biosolids in the whole United States. With their feedstock that they have currently under control, we can make about 1.3 billion litres of crude per year. And this is a material that's getting banned from being spread on land, so they have to find an alternative use. And we've done quite a lot of co-publicity with them around this. But clearly, it's a feedstock supply that we all contribute to every day, sometimes twice a day, and it is global. It's quite easy to model how much fuel each of you make. There is some variation on countries, but I won't go into that. But basically, on average, you can make about 12 to 16 litres of crude oil per year, and of that, about 5 litres of SAF. And we have, as you see on there, we have obviously projects developing in the UK and the US. We are very keenly looking at this region for our next project too. Had a huge amount of coverage over the last few years as well internationally. It's quite an interesting process. It's kind of escaped the SAF bubble, got into mainstream press. We've been on the BBC and various international TV stations. And it's been quite nice that we've been winning awards on both the feedstock side and on the SAF side. So last year we won Aviation Innovation of the Year. We also won Wastewater Treatment Innovation of the Year. And Innovation is Decarbonising just now, a few weeks ago at the International Wastewater Treatment Award. So I said we are very much driven by this feedstock. We just happen to be making SAF from it. But this is the reason we're doing it. So if you look at the offtake with Wizz, that will save about 1.5 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent. With the biomass and with the biosolids that we currently have signed to us, we can save about 3.8 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent. And there is a clear path with this and with other associated feedstocks where we can start to get to gigaton savings. So watch this space. As you'll guess, we can probably predict that we will have excremental growth over the coming years. And sorry, I had to get that one in. But it is it came about from this critical analysis of the feedstock availability, and importantly, cost. So you can zap that QR code. Please reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about the opportunities and also look to build partners in this region. Thank you very much.
All right, hi everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me here this week. The second last spot before the break, so thought it might be a tough slot, but it's been some really interesting content today, so everyone looks like they're still really engaged. This is my first time at Renewables Fuels Week, and I've really learnt a lot. Yeah, finding it really interesting, so thanks for all the presenters so far. Thanks for having me. Originally, given the slot, it was suggested I'd do a bit of audience engagement, but I think we can spare that. I was going to do a vote. I was a bit worried yesterday. It was all about SAF, but I've been assured there's e-diesel and methane and other things on the agenda. So I'll assume everyone's favourite renewable fuel is all the fuels. So we'll move on from there. I guess you've heard from my colleague Retha, and you'll hear from some of the other GHD team today about some of the work we're doing in this space and the challenges. And really at GHD, we're proud to be, working with our clients, which is a lot of people in this room. And we're also, beyond that work, we're also, working really hard internally to develop new solutions, new projects to try and push forward in this space. We're really lucky that GHD gives us the support to kind of push the technical edge in this space, and we do that. Part of that we do via our ventures and origination team, which I work in, which we'll talk about a bit later. But I guess I was sort of reflecting on the work that we've done and the piece here, and this, it actually sounds a bit ridiculous, and I was actually going to put this in a job ad, but I wasn't allowed to. But nowadays, if you see a puff of smoke in the air or a pile of sticks on the ground, I say to my kids, do you know what we can make out of this? And my kids are lucky enough that they're still young enough to engage in the conversation and interested to talk about all the, the fuels and things we can make. So I guess probably, in this room, there's a lot of really smart engineers and scientists who worked in this space for years. But it's really, if you take a step back, we talked a bit about the public engagement, to think what's been done here is really, really interesting, really quite incredible. So I think there's lots to learn, a lot of new supporters out there if the word can get spread. All right, so I'll move on. Yeah, so just quickly, just so you know, it's a bit different for where companies like GHD typically work. I'm in our Origination Ventures team, so we invest in technologies and develop and co-develop new projects. I guess by way of example, we've been working this for years. Back in 2018, we identified a long-duration energy storage site, which is currently being developed today. We're trying to get into feed for a green chemicals facility in Western Australia to support some mineral processing. And we're also trying to develop, sort of a critical stage of a biogenic CO2 hub, which we think could really activate some, much more additional interesting decarbonisation opportunities. And as being talked about, we know the challenges to get projects in this space to FID and beyond, and the economics are challenging. And it's really good to hear about some of the, especially the bio projects they're getting really close and moving forward that have already been talked about. And the other thing I guess just want to touch on is, we know there's a really long runway for these projects. A lot of this work didn't happen overnight. It's been many, many years to get there. And the runway is significantly longer than, say, for a straight renewables project. So So, a lot of the work in the past is, leading to the success today. And I guess that's where we get to the biogenic CO2. We think it's a really interesting piece, and we've been looking into it for a while, identifying sources, and we think, I guess that, beyond the biofuels, biogenic CO2 will have a really interesting piece in decarbonisation of fuels and other areas in the future. So talk a bit about what we're doing in that space. Oops. So the first thing, I guess, is, not all carbon is created equal. And probably, there's a lot of stuff up there, but 2 key points. One is I originally had colours on this slide, and someone said to me, I think Steve, I can't see him, do not put colours on the slide. We don't want to go down the hydrogen rainbow route. So it's deliberately very, very bland. So I've managed to avoid that mistake. But I guess really for carbon and biogenic CO2, you can put in some large buckets, but the key thing, and it's been talked about previously, is we really need to understand if we're going to use biogen or CO2, where it's come from, where it's going, what we're doing with it. And there's 2 key things we need to understand. So one is, we kind of need to understand the chemistry and the physics of it, how the science works, and that's where a lot of people in this room understand. But then the other piece, which is equally as important, is understand the regulations and the policy piece, because the physics and the regulations don't necessarily line up 100%. So we just need to make sure we cover off both those pieces. And I don't understand the policy and regulation piece, so don't ask me about that. But we know people who can do that. So what is biogenic CO2? Oops. So really, in this definition, it's it's sourced from biological sources, and it's in this short carbon cycle. And then again, with the physics and also with the regulation, there's different amounts of biogenic components in different processes. So you might have up to 100% in a fully biological process, whereas a waste-to-energy facility might be 50%. But that's all kind of the accounting side of things. But really, we believe it's going to be an increasingly useful commodity, and we've been doing some work to look for new sources around Australia. And I guess probably unsurprisingly, the more you look for these things, the more opportunities you see. So I guess one area in particular we're focusing on is how biogenic CO2 can support the decarbonisation of an industrial hub. So this is a kind of a made up hub, but a large-scale industrial hub could have 5 to 10 million tonnes of CO2. And we're seeing, in some cases already existing, and in other cases, a range of, biogenic CO2 sources coming in, planned over the next 5 to 10 years. And that may be sort of 5 or 10% of the sort of the industrial hub emissions. I guess what we know about industrial hubs is, people really want to decarbonise, but they understand the challenges. You can add renewable energy into the mix, but that will only get you so far. Things like hydrogen are challenging, and then there's the hard-to-abate industries where you just need alternate solutions. So in that case, carbon capture is really seen as the most practical, sort of cost-effective method. I guess even with that, the costs associated with developing and operating a carbon capture hub, still prohibitive, and especially when you're in a low-margin industry and there's no incentive or cost advantage to do that. So that's where we think perhaps a biogenic CO2 system with an e-fuel or a high-value product may help to enable these hubs. So what we're looking at here is capturing the biogenic CO2 as the first stage in a large-scale industrial hub and converting into a high-value product. So whether that's an e-methane, as a simple solution, or you go more complex to higher-value e-SAF or an e-chemical. And then if you add on to that the potential for government subsidies, some higher value in those products, the case for a hub starts to look promising. the other piece of it is, once you build the core infrastructure, it then enables others to start utilising that infrastructure, at a lower cost. So some of the things, we're working with, we're trying to bring in partners and trying to really extract all the value out of the system at the lowest possible price. So things like, utility scale pipelines, working with the CO2 emitters to see if there's smart things we could do around capturing carbon across multiple sources in a geographically relatively small area, working with technology providers. So there's a lot of work to be done. It's challenging, and the reality is, if anyone thinks they're going to get rich quick doing this, it's probably not the right project for you. But we do see there's value there to be had. And then we see if we can make it work, once we get that core infrastructure in place, there's opportunity for other emitters to join in and have more products, sequestration options, and have it expandable with a bit of smart design. So finally, why the e-fuels? We've already talked about, we know e-fuels are more expensive than their counterparts, the bio counterparts. But we also know that, the e-fuels market is huge. I think we talked about, we need to cover half of Australia with crops, potentially to cover the whole market. So we think e-fuels will be a key part of the solution, and there's opportunity to have them co-located, so where you can upgrade a biosource with an e-fuel. And then I guess the other piece is, over the next 10, 20 years, with the long runway for these projects, we need to start thinking about the next generation of these fuels now, so that when the bio starts to peak out, we've got other options ready to go. So that's it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for having me here.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to stand before you. I'd like to thank Bioenergy Australia organizing this wonderful event and giving me the opportunity to share my research experience with you. So I am Md Jahirul Islam from Central Queensland University, and I am representing the Fuel and Energy Research Group and also the Center for Hydrogen and Renewable Energy. So in Central Queensland University, we have developing the laboratory and research facilities that can manage any types of solid waste like plastics, end-of-life life tires, the biomass, and also the production and analysis of biodiesel, first generation, second generation, third generation from the oilseed crops, and also the algae. So today I'm going to share my research experience and outcomes in one specific part of our research. So today I sharing our research outcome on converting the plastic waste into a standard Australian standard diesel. So I will talk about why the plastic waste, and also how we can convert this into the standard fuels, and whether it is or the quality of the produced fuels, and also its suitability for running in the diesel engine, and also the economic feasibility. So why the plastic waste? As we all know, the plastic waste is the most difficult materials to handle because of non-biodegradable nature. So it can last in the environment forever. And it also have the tendency to break down in producing the microplastics that can contaminate to the water, and it is very dangerous and harmful for our ecosystem, especially the marine life. So currently, about 10% of the used plastic has been recycled, and about 90% of most of them goes to the landfill, and it creating a very harmful environmental hazard, and also it emit the greenhouse gas. So what is the solution or alternative options? Alternative options for managing this harmful solid waste, one of the pyrolysis. So the pyrolysis is a thermochemical process. In this process, we can decompose the solid materials or plastics into in high temperature in the absence of oxygen. So we try to do the pyrolysis with different types of plastics, like the polypropylene, polystyrene, low density hydrocarbon, low density polyethylene, high density polyethylene, PVC, also all others. So we did it in the pyrolysis reactor in Central Queensland University, and it is the pilot scale. And we have the different challenges and the experience when we process the individual plastic types. For example, when we do the pyrolysis for high density polyethylene, low density polyethylene, it produces lots of wax materials rather than the very good crude oil. And also the polystyrene that we found in the packaging materials, and it contains lots of oxygen in it. So this we cannot do the pyrolysis when it have the oxygen, so we need to remove the oxygen before do the pyrolysis. And another difficult materials of plastic we face is PVC. It contains lots of chlorine, so when we try to pyrolyze the PVC, instead of using getting the good oil, it produces lots of acids. So the oil is become very acidic, and it can readily corrode the equipment, copper tube of the reactors. So we have to do our research, do the optimizations of the process, and we did study how to overcome those difficulties. And one solution we got using the mixed plastic may eliminate some of the difficulties. Therefore, the bottom line is doing the plastic pyrolysis to know the nature of the feedstocks, and also to know this the optimum or the correct ratio, mixing ratio is important to get the good result. So far, we able to get over 80% of oil from the pyrolysis, plastic pyrolysis. You can see this. It is the dark color oil that is like the petroleum crude oil. Now, question is this suitable directly used in automobile industry, automobile engine? Answer is no, because it is have the low kind of viscosity, low Keaton index, low high polyaromatic hydrocarbons, and high water content, etc. So we try to upgrade this the crude oil, and the first step is to the distillations, where we can separate the light oil, the heavy oil, and the residue. And after distillation, we get in the oil that meet some of the fuel standard. However, still it is not suitable for running the diesel engine because it contains the sulfur, nitrogen, oxygenated compound, and also the high polyaromatic hydrocarbon. Those are related to greenhouse gas emissions. So we need a further treatment. This is called hydro treatment. So using this hydro treatment process, we can remove those impurities. We can remove the sulfur. We can remove the polyaromatic hydrocarbon. And finally, we got the fuel that meet all the fuel standard, diesel standard. You can see in the right side of the slide, this is the white clean the diesel, and it meet all the diesel standard, and it may suitable for direct use in the diesel engine. So we did a laboratory engine testing with a 4-cylinder, 4-stroke lightweight diesel engine, and what we found that because of high calorific value and high certain number of the fuel we produce, it can run the diesel engine without any difficulties, and it can increase we got the engine power 2.5% increase the engine power, and also 5 to 10% reduction in NOx emissions. And we don't have any significant changes in carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide emission. So in terms of engine testing, what we conclude that engine can run smoothly with this, and it has the benefit both operational and also the emission point of view. Now question is that economically feasible? To find out the answer for this, we did a cost analysis, consulting with the refinery expert. We tried to find out what will be the production cost for this the fuel diesel from the plastic waste. So we did a calculation based on 500 million liter per year refinery capacity, and 25 years plant lifespan. And also we considered that the gate money for the plastic waste is $110 per ton. And based on our calculation, we find out that the refinery cost for this diesel will be $0.6 per liter, and it seems like the economically it is feasible for if we go this industrial scale productions. So in conclusions, what we can say, the waste plastic is not a problem. It is an opportunity. So through the pyrolysis and advanced refinery, we can convert plastic waste into a valuable energy sources regarding the pollution while creating the sustainable fuel. So I invite you to join us in driving innovation and policy changes towards the cleaner and more energy efficient future. This is some of the publication that we made regarding the outcome of this of our project. So that's all for me today. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to acknowledge our industry partners and also our university. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the first session of the day. Thank you again to our wonderful sponsors, BP, our platinum sponsors for today, and to Pauline for introducing that session. All the speakers were fantastic. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. We are, just a reminder, there is no Q&A for this session, but there is the Q&R code on your back. of your name tag. If you'd like to ask any speakers questions there, I'm sure they'll get back to you. And of course the program's on there too. So we're heading to morning tea now, and we're aiming to be back here and starting at 11:30. Thank you.